Luke chapter 22, verse 49, when they which were about him saw what would follow, they said unto him, Lord, shall we smite with the sword? And one of them smote the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. Jesus answered and said, Suffer you this far. And he touched his ear and he healed him. Then Jesus said unto the chief priests and captains of the temple and the elders which were come to him, Be ye come out as against a thief with swords and staves? When I was daily with you in the temple, you stretched forth no hand against me, but this is your hour and the power of darkness. Then they took him and led him and brought him into the high priest's house, and Peter followed afar off. And when they had kindled a fire in the midst of the hall and were set down together, Peter sat down among them. And so as we go back to verse 49, we find here these apostles, when they which were with Jesus saw what would follow. They figured out now, it's dawned on them what's fixing to happen here. You know, they're sort of disturbed maybe. We got this big crowd of people. They've come with swords and staves and lanterns and torches, and Judas is right there in the front of them. When they figured out what was fixing to happen, they're sensing some danger now. And Jesus, of course, has told these apostles 3 or 4 times. And when we get to Jerusalem, and here's what's going to happen while we're in Jerusalem. I'm going to be arrested. I'm going to be tried. I'm going to be crucified. I'm going to die. I'm going to raise from the dead again. But now they're faced with a mob of people, and they've sensed some danger. And when they were about him, saw what would follow. They act like they're sort of surprised. What's going on here? And you know what we're going to hear? Here's the mob. Well, obviously they're here for something. Jesus had warned them about this for a while. He had told them to be praying, but of course, instead of praying, they were asleep. And so now their reaction is here, when they figured out what's fixing to happen, the first thing out of someone's mouth is Lord, shall we smite with the sword? We need to fight these folks off, James. You know, well, should we fight with the sword? How many swords did they have? There's 12 of them counting Jesus. And he says that there's only 2. If you notice verse 38, that is, of course, they only had 2 swords. But let's make use of our 2 swords now. Did they wait for an answer from Jesus? No, notice the next verse, verse 50. And one of them smote the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. They didn't wait for an answer. They're ready. You know, they may not have been praying, they might have been asleep, but now they're ready to defend Jesus, and this is sort of foolish. Now we're up, you know, there's 12 of us against this big mob. We've got 2 swords. One of them drew out his sword. He's cut off the high priest's right ear. Jesus apparently didn't have time to answer. Notice, if you would, John chapter 18. Who was it that pulled out the sword and cut off the servant's ear? Peter did. Peter sort of quick on the draw, huh? Before Jesus had time to even answer. John chapter 18 and verse 10, then Simon Peter, having his sword, drew it. He smote the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Malchus, yeah. Simon Peter, you know, he's always quick to speak. You know, he was pretty much always the first one that would speak up and say, well, don't worry about it, I've got it. You can depend on me. Don't worry about a thing, I'm on your side. He was quick to speak. He had one of the swords, obviously, that was mentioned back in verse 38. If he didn't have it at that time, knowing Peter, he's already told whoever had one of the swords, let me have the sword. Give me the sword. You know, I'll use the sword. You give it to me. I know you won't. You're going to give me the sword. He's quick on the draw. He pulled it out and cut off somebody's ear. Happened pretty quickly. Notice Luke chapter 22. Go back with me now if you're still in John. Luke chapter 22, verse 33. Peter said to Jesus, look, I'm ready to go with you both into prison and to death. It doesn't make me any difference. I'll die for you. And that, of course, is what's fixing to happen here. We've got 2 swords. They're outnumbered against a great multitude of people here that's well armed. They've got these 2 swords. John 18 and verse 3 tells us they came with lanterns and weapons. Matthew 26 and 47, they came with swords and staves. What's a stave? I was going to ask that last week.
Stick, rod,
Stick, yeah, pole, a baseball bat, something, usually something that associated with a tent or something to hold up a tent. A club. They come with swords and with club. We've got 2 swords. Peter's going to get them all killed. I mean, Peter's already cut somebody's ear off. I guess it's laying there on the ground, Dustin. This fella, he's running around there now. I'm sure he's in pain. He's bleeding. He's hollering. He's suffering. And everybody sees all this. They're vastly outnumbered. They are under-equipped compared with this mob. Notice here, let's go back to John chapter 18. Notice here, John tells us who the name of this man was, and Burnell said it was Malchus. Matthew, Mark, and Luke doesn't mention the man's name. John knew the man's name. How did John know the man's name? Notice, go with me. I said John chapter 18. Go first with me to John chapter 21. Who wrote the book of John? Who's buried in Grant's tomb, Andy? Grant?
John wrote the book.
John wrote the book of John. Does John ever say, I, John, wrote this? No.
John, in this account, he doesn't.
No. John wrote John, of course. John wrote 1st, 2nd, 3rd John. John wrote Revelation. Andy's teaching on Wednesday nights. But notice how John, he never says, I, John, wrote this. John chapter 21, verse 24. Notice how John always referred to himself. This is the disciple. John will refer to himself as a disciple, the disciple, this disciple. This is the disciple which testified of these things, and this is the disciple that wrote these things. Talking about himself. Why he never mentions his name, I don't know. He never identified himself as John, but he says, this disciple here. Go back with me now to John chapter 18. Notice what's going to be said here. John chapter 18. Peter's going to follow Jesus. Who else is going to follow Jesus? Any other of the other apostles going to follow Jesus after he's arrested? Notice verse 15. John chapter 18, verse 15. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. That disciple, now we're talking about John again. He's talking about himself as being the disciple, that disciple, this disciple. He don't say I, John. But that disciple was known unto the high priest. John was familiar with the high priest and the high priest's household. That disciple was known unto the high priest, and that disciple went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. Notice verse 16, but Peter stood at the door without. Then went out that other disciple, here's John again, then went out that other disciple, which was known unto the high priest, and spake unto her that kept the door, and he brought in the apostle Peter. So John was, for some reason, was familiar with the high priest and his household. He was familiar. He knew who this servant was. He named him, called him by his name. His name was Malchus. Notice verse 26 of John chapter 18. Verse 26, one of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman, whose ear Peter cut off. John knew the person who had his ear cut off. He also knew who his kinsmen were. Maybe this is his brother he's talking about. Maybe it's his first cousin. But he knew this person who's going to talk to Peter here now. He was kinfolk to the guy who got his ear cut off. So John was apparently very familiar with these folks. And so he was able to tell us the name of the man who got his ear cut off. And that's just a sort of a side note. Does that actually matter? Probably not. But notice, we've got a bad situation here. Everybody's fixing to get killed because we're out in the wind. We ain't got the two swords, and Peter's already pulled his out. They'll probably take him out first, Notice verse 51. Is that God's plan? Everybody's going to get killed now in the Garden of Gethsemane because of the Apostle Peter and his actions. Verse 51. Jesus had answered, said, suffer you thus far. And he touched his ear, and he healed him. Who's Jesus talking to there? And you know, I think
He's talking to Malchus there.
he's talking to Malchus. Obviously, apparently.
Permit me to fix your ears, sir.
Yeah.
Before you arrest me, before you take me away, before you leave me in jail,
Yeah.
let me make you out here okay.
Yeah, and to me that's obvious. Some things argue it another way, but look, you know, the man's ear, I guess, is laying on the ground. James, did he pick it up and put it back on the side of his head? I don't know. But I think he's telling this fellow, suffer you thus far. You have suffered thus far. But it's fixing to stop. You know, he puts his ear back on, the bleeding stops, the hollering stops. Some folks have the idea that he's talking to the mob. Y'all have suffered the injury to one person here, but we're going to stop it here. You won't go any further than this. Peter, put up your sword. Some folks think that he's talking to the apostles that, you know, that's enough suffering and violence, Peter. Put up your sword. We're going to have to allow these events, Peter, to take place, so put your sword up. Suffer or allow what's going on thus far, but that's the end of it. Matthew chapter 26 and verse 54, he told Peter to put up your sword, because Peter, if you're going to live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. Verse 54, he's telling him or ask the question, how can then the prophecy or the scripture be fulfilled if you're going to fight with a sword, Peter? You know, and if we were to go to Matthew chapter 16, but we won't, but Jesus had told these apostles again that he's going to be suffered and killed and died and resurrected in Jerusalem there, and Peter told him, well, no, don't worry about that, ain't going to happen. You forgot about me, I'm on your side. And that's when he told Peter to get behind me, Satan. Remember why? Peter, you're not interested in what God's will is. You're interested in what you want for yourself. You're going to protect me, and you're going to prevent what God's will is. Peter, put up your sword so that the prophecy can be fulfilled. Peter, you're not fighting against this mob, but you're actually fighting against the will of God. Put up your sword. This ain't the way it's supposed to happen. We don't all need to get killed here. You apostles, you need to allow this to go forward. This is God the Father's will. Everybody could have been killed. Notice John chapter 18. Guess I should have stayed there. John chapter 18 and verse, where did it go? Verse 7 through 9, something like that. John chapter 18, verse 7, but then asked he them again, who are y'all looking for? They said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I've told you that I'm him. If therefore you seek me, let these go away. Notice verse 9, let these go away, that the saying might be fulfilled, the prophecy fulfilled, which he spake, of those that you gave me, I didn't lose any of them. He did prophesy that these apostles weren't going to be killed. Peter's fixing to get killed. Peter's going to fight against not against this mob, but against the prophecy, against God's word. And so Peter, put up your sword. We can't do it this way. Notice that Jesus in his actions now. We've already said he touched the man's ear and he healed him. Touched his ear, healed him. Luke is the only one that says that this healing took place. Matthew, Mark, John doesn't record that. Luke tells us that Jesus healed a man. Would that be sort of a rebuke to the Apostle Peter especially? He's hastily cut the man's ear off, and the Lord has swiftly put it back on.
I think it goes more to the nature of Jesus.
Do what now?
I think it goes more to the nature of Jesus.
Exactly, yeah.
Jesus relieved the suffering, he relieved the air, he fixed the situation, he put the man's ear back on.
Yeah.
It goes more to his nature.
Yeah.
That a man who's doing me wrong, I'm going to take care of. Do to others you'd have to do it, you know. I think it goes toward Jesus' nature.
You mean I can't get back at you when you do something wrong to me?
Not follow the example of Jesus.
Well, what is our natural instinct now, Andy? And you're right. You're right. First of all, this is a rebuke to these apostles, to the Apostle Peter. First of all, he hastily chopped the man's ear off, and Jesus swiftly put it back on the side of his head. Peter's hasty action was followed by the swift action of Jesus. He touched his ear and he healed him. Dickie, we're in Luke chapter 22, verse 52, 51, Luke 22, 51. You know, Jesus, first of all, he's performed a miracle in front of this mob. He performed a miracle.
How would you think that if you were Malchus, censor to arrest him for being an imposter, and he did this, would you went home with your job?
Well, that's why I was going to ask you that now, Andy. Why are you asking me?
You are the recipient of a proven miracle. My ear has been put back on without medical attention.
Yeah.
You still want me to arrest this man? I'm going home. I'm out of here.
Well, what about the rest of the mob? They saw what? They heard him hollering on. They saw the blood, and you know, it's just everywhere, and he's hollering. And
Jesus fixed the suffering, but it didn't stop God's divine plan.
okay, that's a good point. Yeah, and this mob was intent on doing something. Had Jesus ever performed a miracle before?
Yes.
Yeah, in front of lots of them. Yeah. I'm like you. I think that would have made an impression on me, but maybe not. Maybe not. You know, maybe we ought to just all go home. You know, he just stuck the man's ear back on his side of his head. He must be worth something. But of course, that didn't bother them at all. You know, man, all of them, I guess, saw that the man's ear was missing. He's bleeding. He's hollering. Jesus showed his power to heal them, but he showed his mercy and his grace and his goodness towards this person who had come out there against him. Would I do that today? Harold, it depends on what you've done to me now.
I'm going to defend the soldiers that carried out their job.
Okay.
They were doing the job that they were told to do.
Absolutely. That's true too.
The same people that nailed Jesus to the cross. Were they guilty of nailing him to the cross? Yes. Physically, they nailed him to the cross.
Yes.
But they're only carrying out the orders that they were given to do.
Yes.
So does that negate their responsibility? They did the act, but it was under somebody else's authority.
Well, for us today, no, that would not be an excuse for me to do the wrong thing. You know, they don't want to offend the people, and so Jesus tells them there, as we go back to chapter 22, verse 53, he says, "But this is your hour. This is the time that you chose." 2:30 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning. You know, it's dark. You chose to come at night. You've chosen to come during the nighttime at this particular hour, covered by darkness. You know, by the power of darkness. I've got John chapter 3, verse 19. I don't know what that says. Notice John chapter 3. We'll see what that says. John chapter 3, verse 19. Okay, he's talking about spiritual light and spiritual darkness here, but the concept is the same as physical light and physical darkness. John chapter 3, verse 19, this is the commandment, that light is coming to the world. This is spiritual light, and men love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. What's the best time to commit a crime? At night? Because you can't see as good, huh? Yeah. Ain't it, Andy? If I'm going to do something wrong, I'm going to do something wrong, Harold, so I'm going to get out right in front of the whole world and do it. No.
Evil loves darkness.
Yeah, that's the next verse. Notice verse 20. For everyone that does evil, they hate the light. They're not going to do that in the light unless their deeds should be reproved. Let's do this at night so they can't see us. They can't see us as good if they see us at all. That's nonsense to do it during the daylight, and that was, of course, the attitude of these people here in the Garden of Gethsemane. They chose the hour, they chose the cover of darkness. Were they courageous? These folks were courageous.
Cowards.
They were cowards. And I think that's what Jesus is telling the Jews there. That, you know, I was there in the temple every day. You could have done this back then. They were afraid. They brought Roman soldiers with them. Jesus is pointing out to them that this is shameful, this is embarrassing to even speak of what you folks are doing right now. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You come out here like I'm some common thief, and I haven't done anything to anybody. You know, Paul in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12 described a spiritual